Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a system that has a few European nightcrawler worms living in it. When I say few, I would have to say that it is probably the smallest population of worms that live in any of my systems. It's thought that we have fewer than 150 worms living in this experimental system that I refer to as my castings boulders system. And castings boulders, they're basically just the things that wouldn't pass through my screen when I was kind of trying to narrow my collection of vermicompost down to only the finest material. These boulders just couldn't break up, wouldn't pass through the screen. And I had a whole bunch of them sitting around for some time, and I made the decision to start a new bin with these things. And that was the foundation for our castings boulder system. And the system is now 111 days in service. We were here 11 days ago to celebrate 100 days in service, giving them feeding number 8 over the past few feedings now. Past few check-ins, we've been playing ping pong here, moving the feeding zone from one edge of the bin to the other, and we're going to carry on. So this little container here just meant to show where we last fed. So the opposite side of the bin is where we're feeding today. And I got some watermelon rind for them. Hopefully they've done away with the cantaloupe melon rind they got 11 days ago. But then again, don't forget, very small population, we'll have to see. Either way, I intend to give them the food I bought down for them anyway. Either way, I'm going to get a glove on, get the system up on the bench, and we're going to get to work. You may have noticed when we were back at the shelf that this system's a little different in that it has sort of two containers, one resting within the other. And the whole idea behind that was that I was using the top container here that has holes in it as the environment so that we can keep moisture levels super high and do so in such a way that if we go a little bit overboard, we know that the excess moisture will simply drain out down into the larger container below and not allow for things to get too swamped in here. Although, as you can see, we had the plastic covers on, allowing for very little, if any, moisture to escape through evaporation. So I started the system out by being very generous and adding moisture regularly, but I believe that over the past few check-ins, ever since the summer months have started rolling in and the humidity's been increasing gradually, I've limited the amount of moisture that I've been adding to the system, pretty much limiting it to the moisture that comes in with the foods that they're getting, such as the moisture coming in with today's watermelon portion, which, as you saw, is not much. I don't know, maybe I'm just imagining, but the clitellum, that little bulge, that little saddle on the worms, very prominent. It makes me wonder if these worms have been mating, possibly preparing to drop off some cocoons, and as luck would have it, I'm spotting a cocoon right out here on the surface on the paper covering. And cocoons is something that we've been spotting here and there in this system during the past few check-ins. And I see another one right there. So we were kind of jazzed about the fact that we bumped into multiple cocoons last time we were in here, or maybe it was 2 check-ins ago. And I'll admit, I continue to get jazzed about it, because that's a good sign. It probably means that if that mating tendency has been going on for some time now, which I hope it has been, then it is possible that we've probably got more worms living in here than just, I think it was 134 was the estimated number of worms thought to occupy this system. So every now and then I just like to grab a boulder, one of these little clumps that I refer to as boulders, and just check them out, you know. I guess ultimately if we really wanted to, we could just kind of spend some time and pick every one of them up and break them apart into little fragments. But I went into this hoping that the worms would do something along those lines. And that what would be left with here in the end is some nice regular vermicompost, just like any other worm bin. Kind of rehabbing the material, but well, let's dig in to see how the whoa. Okay, I'm sorry. Wasn't quite expecting that, especially right after we just got done talking about how few worms are thought to occupy this system. I'm starting to get this sense that we've gone beyond 134 worms in here, or maybe we're just kind of getting at I don't know, getting some sort of a weird outlier situation happening here. So usually when you feed melon, either watermelon, cantaloupe melon, you usually do find the outer skin of the melon remaining, because that takes them a little longer to eat, but it does seem like they've stripped all the juicy flesh, the yummy fruit off the rind at this point. I guess the other stuff we're bumping into here are some of the coffee filters I included as bedding last time. I just had them within easy reach. I just grabbed a handful of them, 2 or 3 or 4, I don't even remember how many. And I believe that besides cantaloupe melon rind and coffee filters as bedding, I believe we also included some coffee. And we're going to follow through with what we've been doing here, which is to pretty much empty out the feeding zone that was used last time on this edge, and bring whatever remains, leftover bits of cantaloupe melon rind, leftover bits of paper, of which there's quite a bit, and use that material to set up the feeding zone on the opposite edge of the bin. So definitely liking what I'm seeing here as far as number of worms occupying the system. I definitely get the sense now that we're beyond 134, if I'm remembering correctly, if I'm remembering that was the estimated number that we came up with together. Because what I'll do is I'll always show the release of the worms into my new systems to the best of my ability, and then poll the viewers and ask that they leave comments to let me know how many worms they believe occupy my systems. So that's the reason we come up with these oddball numbers for the estimated worm count in my systems, because it's an averaged number of everyone's estimate. So I believe that just referring to the population size in here as being a certain amount when it started is the way to go anymore. That's kind of the way I've been doing it anymore, because who knows what has happened over the past 111 days. I mean, we've seen cocoons, so it's fair to expect that we've got mating going on here and reproduction and expansion of the population. I mean, worms somehow are capable of sensing the fact that they have space into which their population can grow. So it does seem like they're able to tell that there's room enough to increase the number of worms, and then they do just that. And similarly, they're also capable of regulating their mating once they sense that space is starting to run low. So that's pretty interesting to me, how these creatures are somehow able to tell collectively that, hey, you know, we're starting to run out of space, let's not continue with this expansion of our head count, let's just stop reproducing and see what happens. And that's just really interesting to me. I don't know, this one coffee filter just seemed like it was kind of folded over on itself a bit too much, so I tried to undo that. Not that it makes much difference. I would assume once we lay this stuff down in here and it just starts to collapse on itself, it's just going to do the same exact thing. So yeah, we definitely have sufficient paper product here to use as bedding for today's feeding without needing to add more, if you ask me. I think what we just placed in there was probably half a dozen or so coffee filters. And then in can come today's feeding of these only 3 pieces of watermelon. Stuff that I assume is going to go quite quickly. So I guess we'll just have to see how it progresses when we get back here next time. So as I usually do, I'll just take some of the surrounding material that was pushed aside and cover up the feeding zone. I wouldn't want that delicious, fragrant fruit to become a attractor, something that would draw flying insects. And you know, I thought I did see a couple flying insects here and there, so I think we're gonna use some of this Mosquito Dunks. Sprinkle it in here. I mean, I can't say that I'm seeing any sort of a major issue, but I've been trying to be mindful to try to use this stuff here and there in most of my systems, just so if flying insects do sneak in, they don't have the ability to have an expansion of their population happen. So seems like we're running a little bit low. I might have to grind up another one of those little Mosquito Dunks cookies, but that's pretty much it for our check-in with the European nightcrawlers here in the castings boulders bin. I guess we'll just take the worn edge of the top covering paper and continue to use that edge of it over on the feeding zone side, because it does seem like when the worms have had their fill of the yummy foods, they like to cruise out to the surface, perhaps meet a potential mate, and then while they're there they tend to nibble on the top covering material. So we'll leave them a little something there which already has some signs of wear. So let's get everything covered back up, and as we've been doing, we'll just put this little carton right on top of where we last fed to show us where we fed, so we know where to check next time we get back in here. So that's it for the check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.